we see the change that is taking place, because history shows us that cultural transformations rarely begin with force or hostility. Even those that end up with force or hostility rarely start with force and hostility. They're small, reasonable changes, and is framed as compassion, progress, neutrality, and almost always they follow the same pattern. Number one, a change is included as minor or harmless. Opposition is framed as irrational or extreme. Institutions quietly adopt the change. Dissent becomes socially or professionally costly, and reversal eventually becomes impossible. It is not me being an alarmist. It is a historical pattern that we need to recognize is a potential problem.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon Sense in Current Times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. We start the New Year's off, and I wanted to still be talking about Christmas. Like, why on earth would I want to be talking about Christmas? And this idea of using happy holidays and Christmas. Well, first of all, let's just go ahead and start with this part that I said at the very beginning, which is I said Happy New Year. Well, in order to be inclusive, I would have to include all four of the different New Years, and there may be even more than that, but the four main ones that I could think of are Chinese New Year, Jewish New Year, the New Year that we celebrate that has just happened on January the 1st, and finally the Islamic New Year as well. All of them are different parts of the calendar that we celebrate. So my question is why is it that we have to do it from that response? But why is this a big deal? And I'm going to address that at the end. But the big thing for me that's kind of funny about this is I've kind of posted or talked about this several years in a row right around Christmas time. And the most controversial stuff that I ever say has to deal with this one particular topic, saying happy holidays or Merry Christmas. And so I wanted to address kind of the main comments that I received and talk about it in that sense, because it is important as we go through 2026 that we actually look at this, because this sets a framework for something that I think is bigger and more important than just the phrase Merry Christmas or the phrase Happy Holidays. But I do want to address the main comments that are out there, because some of them sound good on the surface, but in reality is not. And at the end, when I get to explain why all this is important, you'll understand why that these comments are more concerning than what one might think. So the first one is this, and this is probably the most common one that I have, is nobody is offended by Merry Christmas. People say the outrage is fake, and that when Christians are talking about it, that all we're doing is just creating, again, this fake outrage. So here's a couple of things that I would say about this. One, why are people trying to stop it? Why are people wanting us to not say Merry Christmas? Why are people upset when we talk about the fact that Happy Holidays is offensive to us? Why do they say it's fake outrage? Why can't my outrage be legitimate? Just because you do not understand my outrage doesn't necessarily make it untrue. Doesn't mean that I don't get upset over it. Now, the question is whether or not my feelings are real, because they are real. Everybody's feelings are real. The question is whether feelings are true or not. And that's where we have to start focusing on. We need to stop thinking about whether or not people's outrage is real or not real. We need to start asking, is it true or not true? So let's just kind of look at a few little points that are here that would indicate to me that people are upset about Merry Christmas. In 2023, there was a school district in Pennsylvania that directed bus drivers to remove Christmas decorations after receiving community concerns about religious neutrality. They did this specifically in the name of inclusivity. People obviously complained about Merry Christmas. They actually reacted and did something about it. This was 2 years ago. At Michigan State University, the Inclusive Guide told employees not only to say Merry Christmas, they even wouldn't let them use the word Merry in greetings anymore. In 2010, Target employee claimed that she was fired for saying Merry Christmas. Some retailers, Walmart and Lowe's, have periodically faced criticisms. on it, whether they use Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. They received criticisms on both sides of the coin. Once again, if I say Merry Christmas and people are upset about it, then there is actually real outrage that needs to be addressed and taken place on it. So again, if people could be upset over the Merry Christmas, why can I not be upset over Happy Holidays? Now, many of them aren't always like an official banning. It is not something that says that you cannot do something. The Macy's, Best Buy, and the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, has sent advisories about school holidays programs being too Christmas centric. So again, it may not be always just loud, but it may be just strongly encouraged or strongly discouraged. Even just the changing of words is something that is important. And we've addressed that on this show. And I'm going to address this a little bit later on in this program on why it is important that we actually look at these words and that the words have meanings in and of itself. Now, the second part is this, and it kind of ties in with the same one. They say, who is actually offended? You need to name names. Okay, well, first of all, my offense is why is everybody else's offense more important than mine? Why is it that we have to look at it from any other way? I think that's one of the questions that we need to have. But you want me to name names, I will name names. Outside of the ones that I just mentioned just a moment ago, I do think it is still a fair question for us to say it. So this is a short list that I was able to come up relatively quickly on people that believed Merry Christmas or an overt Christmas display could offend somebody. But I encourage you to do the research on your own. Find out about it. Don't just criticize me for saying that Happy Holidays is a response or that people can't say Merry Christmas. Here are some of the ones. Again, we talked about the School District of Pennsylvania, Michigan State University, the San Diego Public School System, restricted Christmas decor. In Dublin, Ohio, there was a city employee holiday guidance. The Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in 2006. The University of California training materials said that Merry Christmas is a microaggression. Merry Christmas is a microaggression. Who's offended? Anybody that thinks that Merry Christmas is an aggressive statement would be someone who I think is offensive. Target, past corporate guidance said to avoid Merry Christmas. Best Buy, seasonal advertising policy said not to use it. Lowe's had holiday language preferences. Starbucks, and there was this cup design controversy back in 2015. Again, why would they change it from a Christmas cup to a holiday cup? Why would they do that unless they were trying to avoid Christmas in some form or fashion? But here's a list of others that Liberty Counsel has also come up with. Academy Sports and Outdoors, American Eagle, Barnes & Noble, Big Lots, Burlington Coat Factory, CVS, Dick's Sporting Goods, Eddie Bauer, Gap, Kmart, Lord & Taylor, Nordstrom's, TJ Maxx, and Walgreens. And that's just to name a few that have happened over the last several years. I'm not stretching too far back on this. Now, many people during this time and saying that it was fake, all this other stuff, some of it said this was a media strategy coined by Bill O'Reilly to do it. These are things that occurred after Bill O'Reilly has been taking off the air. I think we need to look at and we need to recognize the fact that there are people out there who are offended by Merry Christmas. There are people out there who are offended by Christ. There are people out there who are offended by the Bible. Jesus himself says that the word of God is offensive. Why are we surprised that that's the case? But this attack usually comes from people who aren't, people who claim they're pagans, and it said so in a lot of the comments on it from there. Many of the comments, people were so upset they had to use profanity and vulgar language, and I usually find that people that do that, particularly in comments, that can't even restrict the language. It's not like an emotional outburst. And when they actually have to put it in the language, I kind of find it interesting, and it usually, in my opinion, destroys their credibility. But I have a very hard time believing that if what I'm saying is not controversial, is not offensive, then why on earth would you get so upset that you have no choice but to resort to profanity? Anyway, so third major criticism on this is Happy Holidays is normal because there's multiple holidays during this time. This is a repeated argument. This is the argument that I used to use. This is an argument that I think is very common. But then you start to actually look at the numbers, and it doesn't make sense anymore. December has other holidays. Yes. Happy holidays, just a broad greeting. Yeah, that's what they're claiming. But this is what you look at when you look at the numbers on it from there. December usually only includes about two major U.S. holidays that are religious: Hanukkah and Christmas. Sometimes Bodhi Day is kind of in there. Some people try to claim Kwanzaa, which Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday, but this is where some of it comes in. Yet, if we want to acknowledge the religious holidays and be inclusive in all of this from here, then I think we need to really look at other months as well. So again, in December, at best you have 4 religious holidays. So here's the other months and where it falls. In January, 6 holidays, more than December. Don't say happy holidays. February, 5, more than December. Don't say happy holidays. March, 8, double. We don't say happy holidays. April, 10, more than double. Don't say happy holidays. May, 6, more than December. Don't say happy holidays. June has 3, July has 2, August has 3. Okay, don't have to say happy holidays in those months. September, 6 religious holidays. Don't say happy holidays. October, 5 religious holidays. Don't say happy holidays. November, 6. Don't say happy holidays. And back down to December, which is 4. There's only 3 months that have less religious holidays than December. So if we want to be inclusive, because there's so many of these religious holidays that are in there, why don't we do that? Interesting. We usually say Happy Easter, which is also a Christian expression, but the difference is that Christmas has the name Christ in it, and that is who we are excluding. That's the name we're trying to take out. It's done throughout all different ways and all different methods and all different means, but what we're trying to do is eliminate the word Christ from our language. We're trying to co-opt it from there. We're trying to change the definitions of it as well. The next big argument is that Christmas is a pagan holiday and Jesus was not born on December 25th. Multiple people talk about this as like this is like the killer of Christmas being done on December 25th. Well, first of all, we don't know when Jesus was born. There is no way. It wasn't like we kept a calendars, and marked it on a calendar back in the time. It wasn't a huge deal outside of the few people that God revealed to and told. It is a huge deal to us now, but at the time, it wasn't something that would have been marked as a significant religious or political holiday for it to happen. But in Jewish Christian symbolism, March 25th was associated with creation. And light was created on the first day, which is Genesis 1, and Jesus is the light of the world, which is John 8. So the belief actually didn't come from a Roman pagan holiday. It was created because they said that 9 months after March 25th was December 25th, and so reality, it was done by Christians from a symbolic nature. Now, some people said that it was co-opted by the Roman holiday. I think it was Sol Invictus is the holiday that they're trying to do that. However, Christmas was already established as this, again, from a symbolic perspective before the holiday Sol Invictus came into being. I would highly encourage you to look that up as well. It became widespread and more recognizable as the day we celebrate it after the Roman holiday was created. But in reality is that it wasn't done that way. Everybody that tells me to look up the history on it, I did. I had before, and I encourage you to do the same. So look up when the dates of Sol Invictus and look up why it was actually picked for December 25th, because we don't know. Now, just because we don't know, does that mean that we can't celebrate it? My birthday is on May 18th. It is rare that I celebrate my birthday on May 18th. Sometimes even growing up, I didn't have my birthday parties on May 18th. I might have had it the Saturday before or even a couple of weeks later, depending on what the school season was, depending on whether my father was out of town or not out of town on work. There was multiple reasons why I didn't always celebrate my birthday on my birthday. Why would this be anything different? You probably do the same. How many of you always celebrate your birthday exactly on the day and don't have any other celebrations at any other point in time? Sometimes you celebrate with family on one day and friends on another day. You don't celebrate it all at the exact same time in the exact same way. But let's just look at some other examples of it. If we are just going to take that into account, Martin Luther King Day, we celebrated the third Monday in January. His actual birth date is January 15th. So because it's not on the same day, does that mean we can't celebrate Martin Luther King Day anymore? George Washington's birthday, he was born February 22nd. Abraham Lincoln's birthday was was February 12th. But we celebrate President's Day on the third Monday in February. Does that eliminate when we can actually celebrate the presidents that we have? Columbus Day, I mean, it was the second Monday in October. The actual historical landing was October 12th. Why don't we do it there? But, you got St. Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day. St. Valentine's Day, we don't know when the birthday was. St. Patrick's Day, there was an argument on whether or not it was March 16th or March 18th. So they decided to celebrate it at a negotiated time on March 17th. We know definitively that it wasn't March 17th, but we celebrated on those days. Now, both those days have been co-opted by secular holidays. Think about it. These religious holidays have been co-opted by secular holidays, and yet no one seems to be upset or worried about the day not matching the exact date of birth when they're celebrating it the way they want to celebrate it. They say that the Bible does not command these Christmas traditions. No, you're absolutely correct. The Bible does not command these Christmas traditions. But I want to celebrate the birth of our Lord. I want to celebrate the person who came into this world to take away the sins, that allows me to have eternal life, because my actions, my works is never going to be perfect enough where I can become face to face with God and be saved for eternity. God sent Jesus down so that he can bridge our imperfection with his righteousness. And I can celebrate it all throughout the year. And I do celebrate it and do worship God. But boy, on December 25th, that's a celebration. That's the day that we choose to celebrate the birth of Christ. In my household, we also celebrate on Christmas Eve on December 24th. He wasn't born on that day either. Regardless, we celebrate the birth of Christ because we're celebrating what he has done. Now, here's the big part that I get. And I'm just going to kind of read it here, is you're making a big deal out of nothing. This is fake outrage. No one is actually offended. This isn't persecution. You've never been persecuted in your life. One of the people that have said this is actually a fake account, and I know the person. He created the fake account because he was sued for harassing people under a real account, and under his fake account, he claims that he is a student of biblical history and been a preacher or a pastor since 25, but has to write a fake account to do it because he misused his original account from there. I will say his fake account is quite funny. And I do enjoy reading it for, just kind of parody, and it is kind of interesting to do. However, let's talk about why this should be a crusade. Let's talk about why it's there. Let's talk about how come this is a big deal to me after Christmas is over. Like, why would I talk about it now? Why would I want to wear the sweatshirt that says "We say Happy Holidays" to avoid one name? Here's the reason why. And if you look at Orwell and you look at what Orwell has to say about it, we see the change that is taking place, because history shows us that cultural transformations rarely begin with force or hostility. Even those that end up with force or hostility rarely start with force and hostility. They're small, reasonable changes, and is framed as compassion, progress, neutrality, and almost always they follow the same pattern. Number one, a change is included as minor or harmless. Opposition is framed as irrational or extreme. Institutions quietly adopt the change. I list those institutions at the beginning. Dissent becomes socially or professionally costly. and reversal eventually becomes impossible. It is not me being an alarmist. It is a historical pattern that we need to recognize is a potential problem. Now, we've seen this historically. Let's give a few examples. Nazi Germany. You know, the framing was that Hitler was just loud and harmless. And then it became, well, he's just going to stabilize things. And then legitimate institutions handed power over through normal processes. Tyranny begins with logic and incrementally takes power. The Bolshevik Revolution, it's a fringe group of idealists just seeking equality, and it ended up becoming totalitarian rule and mass repression. Mao's Cultural Revolution, not much different there, a moral correction. And it was just to restore the revolutionary values that was happening at the time. But then there became mass purges, cultural destruction. People got persecuted. Millions of people got persecuted. The Iranian Revolution, 1979, it was just a protest against Western interference and government corruption. And now we see the global consequences that came from it. We see the strength and power that the religious groups within it have taken place, and the worldwide fragility that has come because of it. There's also cultural ones, the sexual revolution. People just saw it as harmless, personal freedom. There's no consequences. But because of the sexual revolution, we've had increase of abortions, climbing, or a decrease of family stability, declining marriages, rising loneliness, instability, increase in mental health, pornography normalization. This is where we redefine pornography, because pornography was a social stigma. We redefine it to adult entertainment. Sounds a lot softer on it. The early view is a private choice, and now we have addictions. It's one of the largest addictions out there, distorted sexuality, because we just wanted to change the definition. It wasn't that big a deal. We're moving from pornography to adult entertainment. It's really not that big a deal. It's only one person, and now we have it from there. We have the redefinition of marriage. We're going to redefine it because it's a civil rights issue. Now these public behaviors have spread everywhere, just like that. If you notice how so much of this has come out, the drag time story hours, all this started because, again, they redefined it as a civil rights issue. There's temporary things that have happened, like the income tax was just temporary and limited. My father recently died, and I'm going through his old paperwork, and he kept everything from like the 1960s and 70s and 80s on and on. And I just pulled out his business tax return from the 1970s. And it was small. It was just a couple of pages. I mean, now just his personal, even after he retired and resigned and sold me the business, his personal income tax statement was huge. We see it with cancel culture or political correctness. Political correctness was just framed as being polite, and now it's an enforcement of idolatry, which then led to cancel culture, which is just a form of accountability. And then it became social eraser. It became erasing social norms or social ideas that we don't like without due process. Social media was just seen as a form of connection, and now it's behavioral conditioning and polarization. We saw it with COVID, where we just changed the names. It was just temporary crisis management, but now we have a precedent for behavioral control. The vaccine was changed from a definition that in order to kind of help push forward what the pharmacies make a ton of money on. The underlying pattern is this. It starts small. It's framed as compassionate. The dissent is labeled harmful. The institutions move faster than public awareness, and reversal becomes almost impossible to take place. History does not collapse with explosions. It erodes through language, incentives, and moral reframing. That's why this is important. It's just one other little step in order to eliminate Christian thought, Christian worldview into our culture. It may not seem that big a deal, and in and of itself, it probably isn't. But none of these other things were. And that's why in 2026, we need to pay attention to it. We need to understand why this is a big deal as we move forward in 2026. Because when we give in a little bit, and we give in a little bit, and we give in a little bit, then it's too late. We're just seeing it now in China. In China, they have they have increased the restrictions on Christmas celebrations in China. Santa Clauses were being arrested. There's literally places in China where they have a whole bunch of Santa Clauses who are being arrested for being Santa. A cultural adaptation of Christmas. And they arrested them from that. House churches had restrictions on what they can and cannot do to celebrate the birth of Christ. It's little things that grow up and become big things. They don't go away on their own. They go away when we speak out, when we say something about it. That's why it's important. That's why it's important for 2026, not for Christmas season. It's important then too, because we can be framed around that time. But it's important because we cannot erase and eliminate the name of Christ out of our culture, out of the U.S. culture. They can redefine patriotism as nationalism to make it look more evil. But in reality it's still patriotism. They can redefine Christmas as holidays to make it seem softer and more inclusive. But in reality it doesn't make sense. But they don't care that it doesn't make sense. All they do is just flip and say, oh, you're just being crazy. I'm crazy. You're absolutely right. Because I do not want to watch our culture collapse because we take Christian values out of that culture. And for all of you listening out there, some of you are thinking, I'm an extremist on this. But I hope others recognize and see that these little things matter, and it's time for us to speak up. It's time for us to be bold. And yes, people are going to label us as crazy, but what time period were changes made where people weren't labeled as crazy to begin? We cannot allow them to redefine Christmas. We cannot let them redefine other parts of our culture and our society for it. History does not fall off a cliff. It drifts. And just like if your car is out of alignment, it'll eventually just drift off. We have to get things aligned back. The Bible tells us repeatedly and warns us repeatedly of this, whether it's in Judges or Isaiah or Proverbs or Romans, all throughout, it tells us this. But it begins with truth, and language becomes dishonest. We eliminate truth. Again, it's not about my feelings. It's about truth. The danger isn't persecution first. The danger is persuasion, and then persecution comes after that. That is what we got to focus on. And that's or should be our focus for 2026. We have to be careful of this moral drift. So let this be a warning as we move into this next year. So thank you so much for listening, and God bless you.